the tomb of a king and his queen from the Han Dynasty in China more than 2,000 years ago. Two almost parallel tomb passages go 80 meters deep into the mountain, with 15 large or small tomb chambers, including the kitchen, toilet, living room, and bedroom. The tomb owner's residence after his death is just like the palace he lived in during his lifetime. This is the story of this ancient tomb. In 1981, local villagers in Xuzhou City, Jiangsu Province, China, discovered many strange boulders and a cave entrance while quarrying. After getting the news, the regional museum sent archaeologists and staff. They found that these boulders were chiseled into square shapes to block this tunnel, which they believed was the entrance to an ancient tomb. We can still see these square boulders today. These huge stones were originally stuffed into the tunnel to block the tomb passage. Each weighs about 7 tons. The question is, how did the tomb robbers pull them out? It turned out that the tomb robbers dug a hole in one end of the boulder, tied a rope, and then dragged the boulder out of the tunnel. A total of 26 such boulders were packed into the tunnel, 13 on top, all dragged out, and 13 on the bottom, still in place. As you can imagine, this is not a task that one or two people can accomplish. A further question, though, is how they pushed the boulders into the tunnel in the first place, which still can't be answered today. Archaeologists discovered another tunnel 20 meters away, and we can see that the boulders were still in place. They believed the two tunnels should lead to two separate tombs. Interestingly, an inscription was carved on the boulder saying, "There is no treasure in my tomb. If people in future generations see this, please have mercy." Yet, his tomb was looted by robbers anyway. Today, we will enter the tomb through the tunnel on the right. This tunnel is 1 meter wide and 1.77 meters high, about the same height as mine. The tunnel entrance faces due west, and the walls are flat and smooth. This tunnel was packed and blocked with 26 boulders, just like the other tunnel, and each boulder was over 2 meters long. We can see from that laser beam that the direction of the tunnel is very straight. However, the tunnel is narrow and low, so to speak, not very friendly to those with claustrophobia. 28 meters forward along the tunnel, on the left is a chamber symbolizing a horse stable. The hole in the ground represents the trough from which the horses drink, and the chamber inside is a chariot garage. Robbers from different historical periods have looted the tomb many times, and archaeologists have found only a few items. Therefore, what we see here today are all replicas, all restored based on the discovered fragments of objects. Despite this, the tomb robbers left out one of the most critical objects, the seal. Of course, this was worthless to them, but based on this, archaeologists learned that the tomb owner was Liu Zhu, king of Chu in the Han Dynasty, who died in 115 BC, indicating this tomb dating back more than 2,000 years. Across the tunnel is a small storage room where archaeologists found many human and horse figurines. The Han Dynasty abolished cruel and horrific human sacrifice, so people used human figurines to replace living people to accompany and serve the tomb owner in the afterlife. 23 meters forward along the tunnel, this spacious chamber is equivalent to a living room. Archaeologists have found roof tiles in many chambers, including this one, indicating that there was originally a wooden building existing inside the chamber, then collapsed as the wood decayed. Moreover, these roof tiles have all been turned over by someone, indicating that these buildings had already collapsed when some tomb robbers came here, and they used to look for treasures under the rubble. Archaeologists found fruit residue and animal bones in this chamber, indicating it was probably a kitchen. People of the Han Dynasty believed that death was the continuation of life, and their lifestyle after death should be the same as when they were alive. This chamber may be the tomb owner's weapons arsenal. By observing the tombs of the Han Dynasty, we can roughly know what the daily life of the Han Dynasty people was like. Archaeologists found some fragments of pottery pots inside this small corner chamber, indicating that this may be a bathroom. This toilet is not from here, but here is a little spoiler. The Han Dynasty people did use such a toilet, and we will see a toilet from 2,000 years ago in later episodes. Passing through this doorway is the largest chamber in the entire tomb, entertaining guests with fine wine, music, and dancing was a significant part of life for the nobles of the Han Dynasty. Therefore, this is likely the tomb owner's ballroom. It is worth mentioning that this pillar is located right in the middle of the two tunnels, and now we are 80 meters deep into the mountain. This one is the easternmost chamber of the entire tomb. Archaeologists found coffin nails in this chamber, indicating that the king's coffin was originally right here. Above this chamber is the highest point of this small hill, which can't be just a coincidence. However, they moved the coffin to another chamber during the funeral due to a large crack in the tomb ceiling. They most likely moved the coffin to this chamber. Again, the things we see in this tomb, including this coffin, are all replicas. It was in this chamber that they discovered the seal. Liu Bang, the founder of the Han Dynasty, believed that the Qin Dynasty, which preceded the Han Dynasty, fell because there was no one to help the central government when rebellions broke out. Liu Bang considered his brothers and nephews the most reliable and trustworthy when he and his descendants needed help. Therefore, he appointed several such relatives to serve as kings with great power across the country, including the king of Chu in the Xuzhou area. In nearly 200 years, 12 generations of Chu kings ruled this region, and this tomb's owner, Liu Zhu, was the sixth king of Chu. This doorway was not here when they built this tomb. On the other side of this doorway is the queen's tomb. So, technically, we are looking at two separate tombs connected by this doorway. Through this doorway, we are about to enter the queen's tomb. The layout of this tomb is similar to that of the king's tomb, except that it is smaller and has fewer chambers. This one is the main chamber, equivalent to the living room. Judging from the chisel marks, the doorway they dug was from the queen's tomb to the king's tomb, indicating that the queen died after the king. In other words, the tomb chambers were connected only after the queen's death. Since archaeologists didn't find evidence to prove who the tomb owner was, they can only speculate based on the funeral customs of the Han Dynasty and by comparing the scale of the two tombs that this one belongs to the queen. This chamber may be the queen's dining room or meeting room. These furniture are replicas. The layout here is very much like a suite. Inside is the bedroom, which is the queen's resting place. The tomb dates back to 115 BC, but archaeologists found a coin issued in 14 AD. That was most likely accidentally left behind by tomb robbers. China was in great chaos around 14 AD, and large-scale systematic tomb robberies were not uncommon, with some even led by the military. The treasures in a large tomb were often enough to cover enormous military expenditures for several years. No wonder they could pull out those boulders weighing several tons from the tunnel. In addition, after the tomb robbery, the tunnel remained open, and in the following 2,000 years, who knows how many people came looking for treasures. This chamber is a kitchen and a storage room. During China's Han Dynasty, especially in the early days, regional kings and queens often took caves in the mountains as their tombs. Of course, only they had the power to mobilize such a large-scale labor force to do this. Through this tunnel, we will leave the tomb. It was from this tunnel the tomb robbers pulled out the square boulders and entered the tomb. These two tunnels are almost parallel, and when I say almost, I mean if they are infinitely long, they won't intersect until 800 kilometers away. That's 500 miles. This chamber is the chariot garage of the queen's tomb, which is smaller than the king's. In comparison, the queen's tomb has 5 chambers, and the king's has 10. We have reason to believe that the layout of this tomb matches the palace they had when they were alive. As for whether there were no treasures in the tomb, as the king himself claimed in that inscription, or whether the tomb robbers took them all away, we may never know. As mentioned earlier, there were 12 generations of Chu kings in the Xuzhou area during the Han Dynasty. and they were all buried in this region after their death. In 1991, archaeologists discovered another true king's tomb in a mountain 15 kilometers away from this one. They found many burial objects and a jade burial suit, and that is what we will see in the next episode.